Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. This is the afternoon of Friday, the 28th of August, 2015. So here we are at the end of the month of August, and our campaign against General Allen is bearing further fruit. August was the month we said we've got to do grievous damage to the political fortunes of this adventurer, right? This purveyor of sedition. And sure enough, things are actually beginning to fall into place. Let us focus first of all on the return of the United States to diplomacy concerning Syria. And you'll remember during that last weekend of July, when Obama was in Africa, he flew over to Kenya and then to Ethiopia for the Organization of African Unity. You'll remember that was the weekend when Allen treacherously tried to stab the U.S. in the back by conniving with his friend Erdogan of Turkey and the Muslim Brotherhood, the kingpin of ISIS, nothing less. You'll remember that Obama and the White House immediately repudiated. They said, no, we don't want any part of a safe haven or safe zone, especially for terrorists. And he repudiated the Allen policy, and he set in motion, Obama did, a diplomatic counterweight. And that is the new United States Special Ambassador for Syria, Michael Ratney, Ratney. I've told you in the past why Obama feels he can't fire Allen, because Allen would take with him a whole bunch of people, quite possibly some very important ones, we don't know. He'd take with him a whole bunch of neocon officials, and they would then line up and start denouncing the Iran nuclear accord, and Obama feels that is a risk he doesn't want to run. After all, what Obama would say, it's less than a month until the Congress has to vote, right? The Congress has got to have the first votes on the Iran nuclear accord by approximately the middle of September. So that's the factor, right? And again, anybody who thinks the president of the United States, simply by virtue of being elected, has real power is a fool. This is the biggest systematic delusion that people have. Well, the president, you have all that power. You have it if you're willing to fight for it and assert it. And, of course, for a long time, Obama was not willing to do that. Be that as it may. Now, there's something positive moving. So the first step for the new special envoy, Michael Ratney, U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, he is a distinguished Foreign Service officer with a distinguished career as a U.S. diplomat. And he did the obvious thing to begin with. Given the structure of the world, the U.S. needs Russia in order to get something positive going in the Syrian bloodbath. And notice there is absolutely no sign that Russia would allow the ouster of Assad. That is not on the table. Don't listen to Brand X analysis or anything else that suggests this is so. It is not so. So here we go. Today we have Agence France Presse, 2 hours ago, reporting, and that's Friday the 28th of August, as I mentioned. Russia on Friday hosted the newly appointed U.S. Special Envoy for Syria as world powers intensify efforts to end the 4-year-plus civil war raging in the country. In Moscow, Ratney met with Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov and other senior officials, but no details about their meeting were immediately released. Well, we do have a readout. We're going to get to that in a minute. The spokesman for the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, Will Stevens, told Agence France Presse ahead of Ratney's meeting that the visit reaffirms the United States' strong commitment to working with the international community to help Syrians lay the foundations for a free, democratic and pluralistic future. Okay, so the rest of this is a little bit vague in this dispatch, but remember, Putin, Russian President Vladimir Putin, this past week had two important visitors, the Jordanian King Abdullah II and Egyptian President General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And these two personalities are also they have also discussed the Syrian, ISIS, and related questions in terms of what to do about it. There's a Russian diplomatic offensive. The Russian diplomatic offensive is that there should be a regional anti-ISIS alliance. This, of course, is poison for the seditious General Allen, the U.S. ISIS czar, who is the noose is tightening around him. We'll get to it in a minute. But Erdogan of Turkey does not want a regional alliance against ISIS. He wants to expand ISIS and protect them. But Abdullah of Jordan, possibly, and Sisi for sure, want to shut down ISIS. And we have to remember that Lavrov, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, during the month of August, hosted his Saudi and Iranian counterparts at separate times, as well as members of the Syrian opposition. In other words, people that are in the actual democratic opposition, the people who take part in elections, the people who get seats in the Syrian parliament. In other words, there is an opposition. It is democratic, and I've met actually some of them, and that's fine. But the people who are outside with Kalashnikovs, those are the terrorists. That's a whole different story, and that's ISIS. So the itinerary for Ratney is Moscow, then on to Geneva, and then Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Let's say a couple of other things here. We are going to have the visit of the Saudi king here in Washington, D.C., apparently next week. We are going to have the visit of the Chinese President Xi here in Washington, D.C. This is XI. Okay, President Xi. Now, China, of course, world power, happy to have them involved. They should be involved. They're on the Security Council. They have every reason to be involved. So welcome to that. You can see, therefore, what's going on is diplomacy. There was also a UN Security Council resolution passed this past week with a U.S. yes vote and a Russian yes vote, saying there has to be a diplomatic solution to the Syrian crisis. So believe me, this is not what Allen wants. This is not what Erdogan wants. This is a step forward. So now, for those of you who were waiting, whatever happened to that guy Ratney, he has been setting these things up. So now we have a counterposition. We've got the warmonger neocon, Allen, U.S. ISIS czar Allen. He's the special envoy to members of the so-called anti-ISIS coalition, except in the case of Turkey, it's a pro-ISIS member of the anti-ISIS coalition. The main saboteur, Erdogan of Turkey, Allen's bosom buddy, best friend. They have to go, both of them. So that's that relationship is going up. But now there's an alternative. That's no longer the only game in town. You now have Ratney and a group in the State Department that is interested in solving this. Now, let's not kid ourselves. The Freemasonic element supporting Allen is huge. And we'll get to the full horrendous details of that when we return from on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So we're looking with great interest and with benevolent intentions at the attempt by the new Syrian Special Envoy, Michael Ratney, to go to Moscow, meet with the key official, and that is Bogdanov, deputy Russian foreign minister for the Middle East. So they meet, and then Ratney goes on to Geneva, various European diplomats, UN bureaucracy, and then Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. At the same time that the Saudi king will be here in Washington, and that will be a week when President Xi of China will also be involved. Putin this past week met with Sisi and Abdullah, and Lavrov, the foreign minister, had those conversations with the Iranians and with the Saudis. And you'll remember his choice, colorful language vis-a-vis the delegation led by Foreign Minister Jubair of Saudi Arabia. Apparently, they have a hard time understanding the need for a negotiated solution. We're told that the Saudis actually want the United States to do more to attack Assad. Well, just leaping ahead to the argument, the whole world is now looking with horror, absolute horror, at the appalling situation created by the bombing of Libya and the ouster of Gaddafi, and also by the 4.5 years of civil war fomented by outside powers, Turkey and Saudi Arabia, number 1 and 2, in Syria. All of those refugees converging on Europe are a direct spin-off of these lunatic humanitarian bombing campaigns pushed by people like Hillary Clinton, by Samantha Power, and others. So I cannot imagine that we're going to be able to sell in any form to the American people or the government the idea that it's now time to bomb the Assad regime out of existence and simply deliver this entire area into the hands of these butchers from ISIS. It isn't. The idea is obscene. So lots of luck on that one. Now, as I was saying, the Freemasonic networks mobilized in support of the Allen clique. And, of course, the Allen clique is the Petraeus clique. And behind Petraeus stand the billions of Henry Kravis. On National Public Radio today, we had the Diane Rehm show, right? This is an interesting program, puts out a lot of lines. Not good for the truth, but it tells you what the Georgetown conversation is, I guess. And what do we have? The New York Times character in this thing, they're discussing the fact they did, to their credit, I suppose, talk about the fact that Ratney has now gone on this diplomatic tour, right, of the key capitals. So the New York Times correspondent, let's see if we can find him. I'm not sure I can find him. Anyway, the New York Times correspondent, you can listen to this. Actually, you should. It's interesting. The New York Times correspondent says, well, patronizing, belittling. He says, I'm sure Ratney is a distinguished foreign service officer, but Ratney lacks that massive stature that we see in somebody like Richard Holbrooke or General John Allen. General John Allen is more of a household term for this guy than Ratney. This is what he said, right? Ratney is not a household word. He doesn't have that stature that we see in the case of Holbrooke for Bosnia and so forth. Or Allen. Well, Allen is precisely the guy who has failed, and this is a character who deliberately operates behind the scenes. If people know about Allen, we're going to take that here as an accomplishment of this program, the Tarpley.net website, the Tax Wall Street Party, and similar efforts, because we want you to know about Allen, and we want you to get in the campaign hashtag Fire Allen 4, number 4, ISIS, ISIS. So that's the kind of support we get, right? You can see instinctively and through communication, I'm sure, these networks are now aligning that what Ratney is doing is going to be a failure, because what we really need is bombing and U.S. heavy divisions on the ground. That's the program of Allen and Petraeus. Now, let's just go back a little bit. Here we have the U.S. State Department website, U.S. Department of State Diplomacy in Action, state.gov. Readout of U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, Michael Ratney's trip to Moscow. Media note, Office of the Spokesperson, Washington, D.C., August 28, 2015. U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, Michael Ratney, visited Moscow today for consultations with Russian officials on the ongoing conflict in Syria. These meetings in Moscow are part of consultations to follow up on Secretary Kerry's recent discussions with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov in Doha and Kuala Lumpur, as well as ongoing efforts to support the Syrian opposition and to work towards greater convergence of views among both governments and the Syrians themselves on a political transition. So a lot of this sounds okay, but then we get the U.S. remains strongly committed to achieving a genuine, negotiated political transition away from Bashar al-Assad. That is not the goal. This is Allen talking, right? Allen is interested in this stuff. The regime of Assad has violently suppressed what began as a peaceful protest in 2011. It's a lie. It was violent from the very word go. And the violence goes back to the 1980s. A whole room full, an auditorium full of military cadets were killed. Mass murder by the Muslim Brotherhood butchers way back in the 1980s. We read on in this communique, right, the readout. Assad has proven through his brutal and repressive tactics that he has lost all legitimacy and he must go as part of a genuine political transition. No, I say the bankrupt, cretinous, incompetent State Department officials who pushed Obama into saying Assad must go, or anybody who put this in front of Obama to read, they're the ones who have to go. Their careers have to go to the chopping block, figuratively. This is not ISIS, right? They have to get the sack. How about that? It's softer. They're going to get the sack because they have imposed this idiotic line. There is no basis for getting rid of Assad. It's insane. Did you learn anything from the assassination of the Diem brothers in Saigon in 1963? Did you learn anything from killing Gaddafi? All this constant meddling. Okay, the mad dogs in striped pants are Allen's friends in the State Department. Now, let's look at another side of this. So we support the diplomatic efforts of Ratney, okay? And Ratney is the man, and Allen has to go. Fire Allen for ISIS. Now, however, we've done the readout, we've done the news article, and we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Keep up with everything at Tarpley.net, and comes complete with the daily briefing of the Tax Wall Street Party. You want to know what to do? Get a hold of the Tax Wall Street Party daily briefing. It will tell you how to coordinate your activity with a growing mass movement around the world. Join it. Join us. And the way to start doing that is get yourself a free, no obligation, no cost, no nothing, except good quality stuff, a subscription, right? You get this sent to you every day in your inbox. Generally comes in the middle of the night, right between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. in the morning. That's what you're going to get. And it'll tell you the main thing that's happening in the world, or maybe the main one or two things. Now, an interesting article in the New York Times, Middle East, inquiry weighs whether ISIS analysis was distorted, by Mark Mazzetti, Mazzetti, and Matt Apuzzo, August 25th, 2015. Here we are in the land of the New York Times. Okay? And I said the noose is tightening, the figurative noose, around Allen. The circle is getting tighter. The Pentagon's Inspector General is investigating allegations that military officials have skewed intelligence assessments about the United States-led campaign in Iraq against the Islamic State to provide a more optimistic account of progress, according to several officials familiar with the story. The investigation began after at least one civilian official of the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, told the authorities he had evidence that officials of the United States Central Command, the military headquarters overseeing the American bombing campaign and other efforts against the Islamic State, were improperly reworking, massaging, if you will, were improperly reworking the conclusions of intelligence assessments prepared for policymakers, including President Obama. These government officials said the details were not given. And let me just to give you an idea of the extent of this stuff. We can see, for example, that, say, the anti-war website, right, same day, CENTCOM skewed ISIS war intel to be more upbeat. Inspectors General informed Congress that the intel was likely reworked. The perennial positivity of all public Pentagon assessments on the war against ISIS, despite major glaring losses on the ground, has been a matter of no small controversy for a while, and has also successfully kept elected officials who are on the receiving end of those assessments, kept them maintaining the war strategy as it is. Well, I hope if you've been listening to this program, you can figure out what this is. The attacks on ISIS that began about 1 year ago, August 2014, are a phony war. They're as phony as the Western allies against Nazi Germany between September 1939 and May approximately 1940. They're a phony war. They're the essence of appeasement. And what does it consist of? To pretend you're fighting ISIS, but really to do nothing. And this is what Erdogan is doing today in grand style. But the idea is, these are the Allen networks. Who does this, right? Who's pulling the strings? Allen with his military networks, or better yet, Allen and Petraeus. The Allen-Petraeus faction, dare we say, the Allen-Petraeus breedlove faction, a group of disgruntled, I would say insubordinate, unreliable officers who should be cashiered as generals from the U.S. service. So they've been spreading this. They say, "Oh, we're clobbering them. Man, are we doing a job on them?" And they're doing nothing. Why? Because they want ISIS to grow. If ISIS is defeated, if ISIS really does get clobbered, as we're hoping they will be, then if ISIS is weakened, then it won't be of any use against Iran. It won't be of any use against Russia. It won't be a good CIA secret army of the type that these characters want it to be. So they fake it. Just like, again, look at what Erdogan has been doing, right? In the past, it's just about 1 month that since Erdogan made this announcement that he was going to start attacking ISIS. So what has he done? We're told 3 or 4 airstrikes against ISIS compared to 300 to 400 airstrikes against the main enemy of ISIS, the gallant and capable Kurdish forces. And the U.S. has let this happen. Huh? Boy, that is horrendous. So, what do we know about our dear friend Allen coming up in this stuff? Let's see if we can find some details. We know that Allen has been mentioned quite prominently, actually, in this investigation. Right, his name has been mentioned repeatedly, and especially by this Admiral Kirby. Admiral Kirby, of course, who came from the Pentagon to the State Department where he is now. So here is now a transcript of the State Department briefing. Yes, State Department. On Wednesday, we had at the State Department briefing a question. Can we go back to ISIS? There was a New York Times report today that there's an inquiry trying to decide whether ISIS analysis was distorted. The focus of this piece was primarily DOD, but there are some quotes in here from General John Allen in his talk at the Aspen Forum, I believe. So Allen was hyping, we're winning, it's a great success, don't need to do anything more, let's just keep going. And of course ISIS is getting stronger and stronger, and one of the other included things is that when ISIS gets really strong, then Allen is going to say, time to send the Marines, time to send the Army heavy divisions, the armored divisions, the heavy infantry, and so forth. Mr. Kirby, he goes on though, this is Admiral Kirby. Let's talk about General Allen for a second, a retired 4-star Marine combat leader in Iraq and Afghanistan. He led our NATO mission in Afghanistan before his retirement. He's absolutely the right leader to come in and pull this coalition together and get it to where it is today. I mean, that's General Allen at work. Yeah, faking the reports. I've served for General Allen myself for a short time, and I can tell you, you won't find a more pragmatic, realistic, clear-eyed leader than John Allen, a more seditious, insubordinate, treacherous leader. And so when he says something like he said at Aspen, that ISIS is losing, he meant it and he believed it, and he had the facts to back it up. It doesn't mean, as I said, that there's not going to be times when ISIS or ISIL is going to achieve success. And he defends him again on Thursday. We get another thing. This time he brings it up. General Allen, I think you're referring to, his job is not to run the campaign. His job was to get a coalition formed, established, and functioning. And obviously he's accomplished that. Yeah, except for Turkey, who is on the side of the terrorists from ISIS. My God. Turkey has just come in recently. Turkey has come in. General Allen and Ambassador McGurk, this is his scabrous and, what can we say, prurient sidekick, right? Ambassador McGurk, were key figures in working with that agreement with the Turkish government. But the campaign itself is being run by the Defense Department, the military side of the campaign run by the Defense Department, specifically U.S. Central Command in Tampa. Oh, Allen, time to oust him. He's been lying to the president. He's been faking the reports through his networks. This guy must go. Bad news. Can't trust him. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. Now, we have more about Syria. We have more about Allen and company. But we have to keep in touch with the Greek situation, which has now taken another turn. And that is to say, Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras of Syriza not only resigned, but has now been he has left office. He was a caretaker here for a couple of days. And now we have a new prime minister, and we're going to have elections in 1 month. So let's go to Athens and get the lowdown from Michael Chiotinis. Michael, welcome. Tell us what's going on.
Yes, and that is actually not a real government, of course. This is a transitional government. It's a government just put in place to keep the peace while not really governing until elections are held. So
in English, it's a caretaker government.
A caretaker transitional government with no real authority to make no decisions. So it's absolutely insignificant. Technically it's the first woman prime minister of Greece, but it's totally insignificant.
Michael, I would just say that's all true. But anytime there's an election, whoever has power during the time the election is coming on can influence it in certain subtle or not so subtle ways.
Yeah, of course. And there are legal issues that get into this thing. But the woman who is now the prime minister was appointed to a very high legal office of the legislative power by Tsipras himself. So it's someone who Tsipras trusts. And there are many objections by the opposition, by conservative opposition about her. But so this gives me some confidence about keeping legal things all right in the meantime. Now, the main thing is we are heading towards elections on September 20th. Now, any polling numbers I give you are going to be unreliable for two reasons. The first reason is that polling is the number one means of influencing public opinion. It's money that comes into polls. We've seen this in situations like the recent referendum and in all past elections. Actually, in the referendum, we had polls showing the yes vote winning, but we saw a landslide, 62% no. Now, polling results are bought and paid for by mainstream media, who are controlled by the local oligarchy, and thus are favorable towards whoever they want to promote. And one way that they can promote is that they suddenly appear in the polls. People who never appeared, who are reserves of this system, of the power system, of the oligarchical system. The second reason is that in such new and highly variable, volatile political situations, electoral behavior is relatively unpredictable. We only need to remember the sudden explosion of Syriza's electoral influence back in May of 2012, when we first came to talk about Greece.
These reports, sure.
Yes. No one could see this explosion of Syriza back in 2012 coming. What could be seen, and is also seen right now, let me tell you, and this is my main point, if someone looks closely enough at the polls, it's a huge pool of undecided voters who that polls are used to ignore. And in these highly volatile situations, both economically and politically, no one can really foresee what undecided voters will choose when they actually find themselves, in front of the ballot box.
Right.
So in 2012 we saw Syriza. Maybe this year we will see, this popular unity, the new left of the left. And maybe we'll see something to the far right. I don't know. I'm afraid of it, but we need to see what will happen. In Weimar Germany, I don't think anyone could expect such an explosion of the Nazis. I hope that we don't see something like this, but you see my point. Now,
look, Michael, one of the main points is there's got to be a political party which says no to austerity under any circumstances, because otherwise the Golden Dawn will pose, it will fake trying to fulfill that role. And that's what happened in Germany, right? That the Social Democrats wouldn't fight for the workers, and the Nazis claimed that they would.
Absolutely. That is correct. And this popular unity party they are trying to be an anti-austerity front. That is the main issue here. That they try to use the word front. We are a front, not a party in the narrow sense, but a front of all people who want to end austerity by all means, even if we need to get out of the Eurozone.
Exactly.
They are beginning to take other parties, small parties of the left wing, with them, who also want to return of the drachma, and that's a respectable opinion, a respectable strategy. But another question is that many people are maybe asking is what the hell is Tsipras doing? And I need to say two words about this. What Tsipras thinks that he's doing here is saving Europe. That's my view. There was a so-called, in these talks, in this negotiation, there was a so-called Schäuble plan that reportedly had a temporary euro exit for Greece, plus, and that's the important point that no one has spoke about this, is a tighter fiscal oversight of the rest of the Eurozone. In other words, a political reshuffling of the Eurozone to impose even tighter measures and tighter austerity, and with some kind of fiscal oversight, direct fiscal oversight of the Eurozone on.
I think we've seen newspaper reports this week that Brussels is calling for a pan-European finance ministry.
Yes, something like that,
right.
Which, of course, Germany will control. And I think that Tsipras is trying to fight in these terms for Europe. He's not trying to be He's trying not to be chauvinist, just to think like a European. I absolutely respect both strategies, let me tell you. What I'm afraid is what will happen in the meantime when you try to save Europe and Golden Dawn, blows up in your face. That's my concern. And
Michael, one thing that occurred to me this week is we had a whiff of panic in the world on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday between China and Europe and the U.S. If somebody in Greece had come forward at the height of that panic and say, "Guess what? We're gonna say all bets are off," and at the height of the crash, right, when China is crashing and Europe is crashing and the U.S. is crashing, say, "Now we want to negotiate because now you know that if we leave, your whole system will come crashing down."
Yeah, but you need to have some leverage, and you need to believe in Greece's leverage. But I'm afraid that a very weak government that we had couldn't do something like this. We need a strong government somehow, some kind of a strong anti-austerity government, and we need to see how things play out from now on.
Okay, and we will, week to week, right? Because we want to keep following this. This is the most advanced laboratory to see, things that are going to be happening in other countries. Thank you, Michael. We'll see you next week. Welcome to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So we are looking now at a complex series of events around international diplomacy, the Russian attempt to start an anti-ISIS coalition and use that then to beat down the pro-terrorist tendencies and activities of Saudi Arabia and Turkey in particular. The U.S., we've got Special Envoy for Syria, Ratney, Michael Ratney in Moscow, and going on to other capitals, and therefore we're interested in the diplomatic aspect. But then parallel to that, inside the United States, we've also got this question of the reworking, the cooking, the massaging, the faking of the intelligence involving the efficacy of the U.S. campaign against ISIS. And again, this is a cover story. It's a way to cover and camouflage a policy of appeasement and phony war. So the idea is you got to pretend that you're attacking ISIS, but you don't really attack them because you want to have ISIS to use against Iran and Russia. And this is summed up in this odious individual, General Allen, who has to be fired. Okay, you want to get a good result of this diplomacy. Get rid of Allen. Dump Allen. Hashtag fire Allen for ISIS. It's getting to be the end of the month. Whether it's August or September, Allen must go. Now, here we have, in particular, the New York Times. Once again, Mark Mazzetti and Matapuzzo, inquiry weighs whether ISIS analysis was distorted, August 25th, 2015. So what do we find here? Allen leading the charge of distorters. The distorter in chief, the top faker, the main intelligence cooker and massager is the ISIS Czar Allen, retired General John Allen. Here we read in the New York Times, the article I just mentioned. In late July, retired General John Allen, who is Mr. Obama's top envoy working with other nations to fight the Islamic State, told the Aspen Security Forum that the terror group's momentum had been, quote, checked strategically, operationally, and by and large, tactically, close quotes. Allen goes on to say, ISIS is losing. This is Allen a month ago in Aspen, Colorado. ISIS is losing, he says. Even, the New York Times notes, as he acknowledged that the campaign faced numerous challenges, from blunting the Islamic State's message to improving the quality of Iraqi forces. Notice now, Ash Carter, the new Pentagon boss, during a news briefing last week, Ash Carter, was more measured. He called the war difficult, and it's going to take some time. But he added, I'm confident that we will succeed in defeating ISIL because we have the right strategy. Well, will you in fact succeed? Here's the problem. Two things happened on the ground this week. One is we have this area. It's about 60 to 70 miles. It stretches along the Turkey-Syrian border. It starts more or less at the Euphrates River. When the great Euphrates River crosses that border, that's kind of a dividing line. And from there, 60 to 70 miles towards the west, we have the safe zone. We have argued it's a safe zone for terrorists. And lo and behold, that's what it's turning out to be. Here's the way it works. First of all, ISIS is gaining in the province of Aleppo, Syria. So the fact that the Kurds have not been allowed to close that stretch of border, the Kurds have not been allowed to cut the ISIS supply line, let them wither on the vine. Kurds prevented by whom? By Erdogan and his sidekick Alan here in Washington. The ISIS gains are mounting in the Aleppo province of Syria, with reports of heavy fighting overnight in which they routed the Free Syrian Army, taking over several villages and approaching the strategically important town of Maraya, which is now a key base for FSA forces. The FSA forces, of course, are a joke. And we have this thing called Division 30 of U.S.-trained moderate terrorist rebels. I'm sorry. It's not Division 30. It's Platoon 30. It's a good-sized platoon. That's it, not a division. So the capture, we now read, I'm reading from antiwar.com. The capture is doubly inconvenient for the U.S. and Turkey, as they have not only been backing the Free Syrian Army, which is mythological, in this region, but the area was a key part of the 60-mile safe zone that the U.S. and Turkey were intending to carve out of northern Syria, which is supposed to be ISIS-free. It's less ISIS-free than ever, writes the witty correspondent here. Less ISIS-free than ever. That is the fault of the U.S. and Turkey. And Alan and Erdogan, as this territory was under the control of Al-Qaeda earlier in the month. So the idea is that the area that is now included, this area, it's this kind of a triangle from the place where the Euphrates crosses the Turkish-Syrian border over to Aleppo and then north. That's sort of what it looks like. That area had been under the control of the Nusra Front. In other words, good old Al-Qaeda, I guess these people would say. Al-Qaeda, bad enough. But what then happened was the Nusra Front said to Erdogan, okay, Erdogan, we understand you want this to be a safe zone, so we'll get out of here, right? We're gonna leave. We're gonna abandon this territory because we understand that's what Erdogan wants. And of course, Erdogan is happy because as soon as the Nusra got out of there, ISIS piled in and they steamrolled the so-called Free Syrian Army, this mythological construct. And now the entire safe zone is safely in the hands of the terrorists from ISIS, the worst butchers and savages that the world has seen in recent years. Okay? So there it goes. ISIS is taking over the territory, and they're generally gaining because of this attempt to provide air cover for them, right? This is an area where it's very hard for the Syrian Arab Air Force to go in and clobber them, which otherwise is what would happen, because they're under the protection of various kinds of air defenses provided by the U.S., by Turkey, and so forth. So you get the idea. This is a disaster. This is where Alan's strategy has brought us. Now, let's just look at one or two other items, because where does this all lead, you may well ask. We have the London Observer here somewhere, and the London Observer is pointing out that there are more cries now to send military forces in there. Actually, we'll get to the London the London Observer in a minute. Here, Philip Giraldi, right? Old CIA. Fine, we know. How Turkey Plays the War on Terror. This is an interesting study. This is done in the American Conservative. Hey, gold is where you find it. So, August 25th, 2015. America's reluctant ally finally offers token assistance against ISIS, only as a cover for campaign against the Kurds. And thank you, Philip Giraldi. Tax Wall Street Party was all over this story 1 month before you. 1 month. So if you want to wait a month, then you can wait for these guys. Otherwise, subscribe to the daily briefing of the Tax Wall Street Party. So here we get a kind of a history of the Turkish characters, right? And we'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. Back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Many developments involving Turkey. This entire thing, Turkey, ISIS, Syria, diplomatically, in terms of scandals, intelligence fakery by Allen and company, and at least a growing awareness, right? We see this reflected better late than never from Philip Giraldi, how Turkey plays the war on terror from the start, writes Giraldi, old CIA. Turkey, which nominally opposes radical rebel groups like ISIS and Nusra, has been curiously absent from the fray, instead arguing that the major effort should be focusing on defeating al-Assad. Not quite accurate. Erdogan is the head of ISIS, and the supplies all go through Turkey. So without that help, they'd be nowhere. But he does say, indeed, Giraldi, when I was in Istanbul last July, bearded rebels, terrorists, were observed in the more fundamentalist neighborhoods collecting money for ISIS without any interference from the numerous and highly visible Turkish police and intelligence agencies. Turkey has also been surreptitiously buying as much as $3 million worth of smuggled oil from ISIS every day, virtually funding the group's activities, because it's the son of Erdogan who does that stuff. Ankara has allowed ISIS militants to freely cross over the Syrian border for what may be described as R&R, rest and relaxation, Vietnam-era language, as well as medical care and training. And then Washington was delighted, and we were delighted here too at the beginning, when Turkey on July 23rd said that they would start attacking ISIS. But of course, that's not what it has turned out to be. This is now 3 or 4 to 100, 3 or 400 in terms of who they're targeting. So we've got a civilian coup, in other words, an auto coup, auto golpe by Erdogan. Right? He's coupping himself, and he's going to take power in a new and more extreme form. So we're also told that there's much rage. Let's remember this. A major air assault on the PKK and other Kurdish targets in Syria, northern Syria, was no warning to American and other allied soldiers and intelligence officers present in that area, a move that outraged U.S. military leaders. That was that Fox report. You heard it here, same day. And we know that the Erdogan factional line is that Kurds are more dangerous than ISIS. I'm sorry, we don't see it. The atrocities are very much on the side of these crazy ISIS guys. Okay, so he's saying 300 strikes against Kurdish targets compared to 3 of ISIS. You get the idea. So one angry American general calls the development a bait and switch. My God, I was on Press TV the same day, and I said it's a bait and switch. Go and look on tarpley.net. While another commented that Erdogan needed a hook to go after the Kurds and lied to Washington. So now we have Erdogan, the hooker of the Muslim Brotherhood. So he wants to win this election and set up a dictatorship. Look at all this stuff. It is truly a monstrosity. And again, let's just remember, where does it all lead? This is actually the London Spectator. Sorry about misidentifying. Not the other paper that I said, but the Spectator of London. So here we go. Simon Jenkins, who has written book-length stuff about this. Here we go again. The drumbeat for sending troops back to Iraq has begun. If you thought that humanitarian intervention was dead and buried, no such luck. It's taking pride of place in the American election. Is it going to happen again? Will the next 12 months really see Western armies return to Iraq? And again, he's written a book about it. Barack Obama and Cameron have been emphatic, no more boots on foreign soil. But as the months go by, the drip, 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 the neocons, the warmongers, the Samantha Power crew of humanitarian bombers. So the idea is that in the British circles, which are often decisive, can be for some of these matters, Pew and Rasmussen now show U.S. population in favor of ground war against ISIS. It's not necessary. Certainly bomb. No problem with bombing. Don't hesitate to bomb. But the main thing is cut the ISIS supply line. Unleash the Kurds. Arm the Kurds. Give the Kurds what they need to simply close the Turkish-Syrian border. Once those supply lines are cut, ISIS will wither and die. And that will be the solution. Obviously, some of the units may scatter. Terrorist fighters may attempt to go in different directions. But in terms of an organized military threat, it will be gone. And also remember, ISIS is a ragtag collection of psychotic patsies. They're lunatics. They have no appeal. They massacre the populations that they conquer, and then when people, even the ones that are duped in the beginning, when they realize what ISIS is, those guys get caught and executed, and you can find this all over the internet. How long can London and Washington tolerate weekly ISIS atrocity videos? There is no self-restraint. Nothing has changed since Gladstone was browbeaten into sending Gordon, Chinese Gordon, into disaster at Khartoum, right? Well, Hillary Clinton says we don't do stupid, and now she says fill the vacuum. And again, warmongers on both sides. Trump the warmonger, Hillary the warmonger, Bernie Sanders dangerously vague on this stuff. Senator from the F-35. So you get the idea. So this is all what Alan wants. To sum it up, by preserving ISIS, Alan thinks he's got a CIA secret army to use against Iran and Russia. These are also insane projects that the American people, I think, would repudiate if they knew the score. The creation of the safe zone 1 month ago has now led to a safe zone in the sense of a safe haven for terrorists, exactly as we've said. Time to strip away the cover for that. Time to let the Syrian Arab Air Force go to work and give them some assistance in terms of spotting and so forth. But the main thing is force the closure of the Turkish-Syrian border, whether Erdogan wants it or not. Shut it down. Don't let it happen. Because right now it's like a corridor to project ISIS terrorist activities deep into the Aleppo area and other areas of Syria. And remember, you Americans have a special responsibility. We Americans, we have got to get rid of Alan. Hashtag fire Alan for ISIS, and do it now. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., Friday, the 28th of August. Now, a couple of other things about Turkey. Now, you'll remember in the course of this past week, and certainly you know everything about it if you got that vital morning briefing from the Tax Wall Street Party, which you can get for free. I don't know what you're waiting for. This is a golden opportunity. It may not go on forever, so get in there now and get your free sub. You'll be grandfathered in, but maybe later on it'll be a different proposition. You'll remember that we had gotten these reports that the Turkish government had betrayed U.S. military secrets. Top secret U.S. military info was traduced, betrayed by Erdogan and company, the MIT intelligence agency that serves him, that when the U.S. was going to put in this pathetic platoon 30 of 65 democratically minded terrorist rebels, when they were introduced into Turkey, from Turkey to Saudi Arabia, to Syria, that the Turkish government, the MIT, told Nusra and ISIS that they were coming, so that these characters were all rounded up, some of them killed, but mainly captured, and that they've now gone over to some posture of cooperating with Nusra and the rest of the brothers, as they call them. So normally that stuff would not be answered. But this past week, the Turkish Foreign Ministry felt obliged to pay attention to that and to deny it, right? That it's simply a fantastic invention or whatever else they said. Now, the other thing you have to remember is that the question of the Iran nuclear accord is in the background, because that's another high-level issue. If the U.S. develops a normal relation with Iran, then the neo-Ottoman clique of madmen, in particular Erdogan and Davutoglu in Ankara, in Istanbul, they feel that is a humiliation for them, that they will be nowhere. They'll be out in left field. They're going to have no importance, no role, right? They've got to be indispensable. And if the U.S. can normalize with Iran, they won't be. So remember, one of the other things that's going on here is the attempt to torpedo the Iran nuclear accord. And we're told even the Israelis are getting into the act. In other words, we got reports from, or at least allegations from the Syrian and Iranian media that one of the reasons Netanyahu has been so eager to bomb Syria in the past couple of weeks is he, on the one hand, he thinks this is a way to divert Syrian power away from dealing with the ISIS in these northern areas, right, where the ISIS are strung out, right? If we could get a pincers, we could have the Kurds and the Syrian Arab army, and then ISIS would be in grave difficulty. But the other thing that Netanyahu is trying to avoid, he's trying to save ISIS, clearly, and one of the things he's got in mind is to inflame opinion among the American Jewish community and try to convince them to say, look, Syria bad, Hezbollah bad, Iran bad, no treaty, be opposed to it. Doesn't look like it's working. And indeed, our friends on National Public Radio, the Diane Rehm show this morning, are saying that the whip count suggests that Obama may indeed have the votes. And not even to prevent his veto from being overridden, given the fact that in the Senate you've got to have 60 votes to go further on any legislative business. It's quite possible, according to these presumably informed sources, that in the Senate especially, the warmonger faction, the anti-Obama group in this case, will not have the 60 votes they need to get the repudiation of the deal. In other words, they want to pass a bill saying the Senate is opposed to this sellout to Iran, blah, blah, blah. They may not even get the 60. So in other words, this whole warmonger operation may fail in the first round, not even when it comes back with a veto on it and they've got to try to override the veto, right? The simple 60 votes to impose cloture and bring something to the floor, they may not even have that. So when Alan looks at that, he says, oh my God, that's one of my main points of blackmail on Obama. And if that goes through, what will the world be coming to? Now, you have also strange bedfellows here. I have an article here from The Nation, James Carden, and he's noting the fact that the New York Times seems to be out to destroy the Iran nuclear accord. Headline, why would the New York Times try to torpedo the Iran deal? Today's front page piece masquerades as news analysis, while pushing a neoconservative agenda. August 24th from Cardin. Now look, let's get the facts. Today, the New York Times ran a piece by two of their golden boys, David E. Sanger, S-A-N-G-E-R, and Michael R. Gordon, calling attention to the alleged weaknesses in the Obama administration's case for the Iranian nuclear accord. Editorially, over on the editorial page, the Times has come out strongly for the deal. Today's report consists mostly of the latest neoconservative talking points, and it's on A1 packaged as news analysis, right? So, how awful. Iran can produce uranium on an industrial scale 15 years in the future. Various Democrats who say it's good, it's bad, but generally bad. In 15 years, Iran will have a highly modern and internationally legitimized enrichment capability. That is a bitter pill to swallow, says Congressman Adam Schiff of California. You get the idea. Dennis Ross, oh my God, Winnip, Zolik, Kimmett, and Ross, right again from the Bush 41 State Department. Dennis Ross, during the late Clinton administration, earned a reputation as Israel's lawyer. He participates with Sanger and Gordon, regurgitating claims that vulnerabilities must be addressed. The gap between the threshold and the weapon status after 15 is small. That's 15 years in the future. Won't you think of something to rectify some of these things if you're so concerned? Anyway, fortunately for the rest of us, the train has left the station. The British Embassy is open. It's alive and well and open for business in Tehran. The Germans, with Sigmar Gabriel, Vice Chancellor of Germany, have been there. They're getting huge contracts. The Japanese are there. The Italians, everybody in Europe is running to cash in. Only the U.S. is out of it because we have these wonderful neocons, right? That's a wonderful benefit of our country, is that we've got this powerful neocon faction, and it's a disaster. So the idea that you could now tell Russia and China and Europe and the rest of the world that they've got to reimpose these sanctions because a gaggle of reactionary, racist, warmonger Republicans and some Democrats, I fear, in the Congress don't like it. This is a non-starter. This entire thing is over with. The UN Security Council has voted. The Iran Accord is a part of international law. This entire argument is over, and therefore it would be good if the U.S. Congress did not embarrass itself by trying to harass this thing. If you do that, you're going against international law, or you become an international bandit. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, our last program of August. And we're now in the last segment. So let's just look at some other themes. Now, we had this whiff of panic in the international finance markets this past week. We also saw some pretty heavy-duty activity by the famous PPT, the Plunge Protection Team, the President's Working Group on Financial Markets, using presumably either Treasury money or more likely Federal Reserve money. But in any case, U.S. public money used to prop up these stock prices, right? The Japanese have the openly acknowledged stock buying authority. The U.S. has something similar, but it's more surreptitious. Now, China, as I pointed out in my polemics with the unfortunate Pepe Escobar in the last couple of weeks, the Chinese leadership can be just as stupid and just as short-sighted as anybody else. And indeed, some of these bureaucrats like to, change course rather promptly. And unfortunately, this gets them into big trouble. The principal problem, once again, is that this government is illegitimate. Nobody chose them. Nobody voted for them in any recognizable sense. So they're obsessed with their own vulnerability. And that is the definition of vulnerability. So they got to compensate for it. Now, We want to congratulate them on their tremendous achievements in economic development. But they now seem to think that they've got to guarantee also a stock market bubble. We have this quote which is being thrown around that President Xi, who's going to be here next week, told a Chinese constituent of his that the Shanghai market had already reached 4,000 on the index, and it was headed towards 10,000. And therefore, cash in, invest, right? And indeed, what we seem to be seeing is margin, that the Chinese system now allows small investors to borrow money to be able to invest. Margin. Now, in the U.S., there is I think it's still there. We'll have to check. But since the crash of 1929, the idea that you would buy stocks using borrowed money, this has been regulated. There's a percentage which is set. But of course, under China, you have communism, but at the same time, total deregulation. Right? There's no pension system. There's no kind of social safety net in that sense. There's no minimum wage, all these things. They don't have any of that, although it's communism. Boy, oh boy. So this system is obviously very, very vulnerable. Deng Xiaoping said to get rich is a glorious thing. And if she really said, I'm like to know whether this is true or not, that the market is going to go to 10,000 in Shanghai, that's just irresponsible. And then to respond with these competitive devaluations. Now, it doesn't seem to have spread any further, but this stuff is not instantaneous, right? These are processes that work themselves out over months. I think it's Vietnam and Kazakhstan so far. But those are, that ain't hay. Those are important countries in their own right. Now, in terms of the U.S. side of it, we stand here for the Lautenbach-Voitinsky approach, which is that you've got to mobilize the credit-creating power of your central bank, make it act like a national bank, at least in part, and use that for infrastructure above all. Infrastructure modernization. As much as you can spend is the right way to do it. We would also add, given the special problem of the U.S., the $1.2 or $1.3 trillion of high-interest student loans. Those have got to be refinanced down to zero. That's the very least we can do for the new generation. So that gets us up to about $6 trillion, $6.5 trillion of 0% long-term credits. 100-year maturities on the infrastructure and decades on the student loans. So we're talking about $6 trillion of cheap, subsidized, 0% long-term federal credit for infrastructure and education. And that will give us the 30 million new productive jobs and the 10 million. We'll have to do the 10 million on the Treasury. Those are for people who need to be introduced into the workforce. Now, instead of this, right, we've had austerity. That's a failure. We've had Keynesian consumer-led, the stimulus, the supplemental. That didn't work. Good results in the short term, but it didn't create a permanent recovery because it didn't revive the capital goods markets. Instead, what we've seen is two things. One is called quantitative easing. Quantitative easing 1, 2, and 3. We've told you what that was. Those are support operations for toxic derivatives to prevent the banks from having to sell those. The Fed buys them and hides the fact that they're intrinsically bankrupt. They have negative value. Remember, get the delete button, get the shredder, get rid of them. They have negative value. They're like the Rasputin back in Al Capps with Labner. The other side of it is you have QE on the one side, right, to prop up the rotten derivative structure. On the other side, 0% for zombie banks and for hedge fund hyenas, but not for anybody in the real economy. So QE ended last November, November 2014, and they all complain now. They say, oh, our stock market is going sideways. We have no growth. Yeah, right, because you have a rotten speculative economy. And now they say, we're afraid that the Fed will take away the 0%. Yes, it's bad to take away the 0%. No, it's bad to have 0% for derivatives only. We want to do it precisely the other way around. We want to say producers will be rewarded with 0% or close to it as we can get, as low as we can get it. That's where we're going to keep it. But not speculators, right? Right now it's all for speculators and the productive side gets nothing. Let's try flipping that over. Let's turn that situation around. The producers get 0% and the financial parasites get whatever their wonderful market allows them, right? They love the free market, so let them take their chances out there. So I think that's pretty much it. Now, this stuff could go on. China is big. Their influence on raw materials and oil and so forth are big. But the main thing that's magnifying these shocks now is derivatives. There are as many derivatives now. Their total value is approximately what it was in 2008, because we have to guess on this, right? Since still, despite Dodd-Frank, it's not reportable. You can't find out. No authoritative statistic about this. But it means the presence of derivatives, as we saw in 2008, magnifies and increases the resonance of any little shock turns into a total earthquake. The other thing I want to reassure people about, Freemasons, right? These Freemasonic lodges, which are so poisonous and toxic to the future of humanity, they love to spread irrationality and hysteria. Remember Y2K? The world was going to end on January 31st, 1999. Somehow it didn't happen. Last year, 2 years ago, we had the Mayan calendar of 2012, the end of the world. No, this time, without even a calendar. I mean, the Y2K had some kind of a calendar behind it, and the Mayan calendar had the Mayan calendar. But now we have lists of 21 random events that seem to happen pretty much every year, whether in October or September or August. But we're told that something apocalyptic is going to happen in September, October of 2015. And I say to people, put aside this pornography of fear, put aside the duperies and the dupe markets of the Freemasons. And we also notice that the libertarians, right? The libertarians love this stuff, right? They roll in it. They cavort in it. It is just up their alley. If you get a Freemasonic libertarian, hey, somebody like Ron Paul or Rand Paul, these are precisely the people that keep everything going with promises of the apocalypse and other forms of crude, transparent, brutal fear pornography. It's time to be national, act rationally in the real world, join the tax force, and see what you think.